The champagne glass in my hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Around the table, my family was still applauding. Mom dabbing her eyes, Dad raising his own glass toward Haley and Marcus. But the sound had gone hollow, like someone had stuffed cotton in my ears. My sister's hand rested on her stomach, protective and possessive, while Marcus stood behind her with his palm on her shoulder, the exact same way he used to stand behind me. "We wanted you all to know together," Haley said, her voice breaking in that practiced way that always made Mom reach for the tissue box. "We're having a baby." I watched my mother pull Haley into her arms. I watched my father clap Marcus on the back. I watched my husband, accept congratulations for a child that should have destroyed him with shame. Marcus's expression made it clear. He knew the baby was his, and so did everyone else in that room. And I watched myself, reflected in the window behind them, still holding that champagne glass, my face frozen in something that might have looked like a smile if you weren't paying attention. The bubbles in my glass had gone flat. I couldn't remember if I'd been about to drink or if my hand had simply stopped working. My throat felt lined with sand. Somewhere in the background, Dad was saying something about family growing, about blessings, about how Marcus would make a wonderful father. Not one person looked at me, not even once. My name is Riley, I'm 34, and I've spent my entire career building order from chaos as an operations manager. This is the story of how I learned that the most dangerous chaos lives inside the people you trust most. Growing up, there were always two versions of every story in our house. There was what actually happened, and there was the version Haley cried about until everyone remembered it her way. When she was 7 and broke Mom's antique vase playing indoor soccer, she sobbed so hard that within an hour, the story became about how I shouldn't have left my backpack where she could trip over it. Never mind that I was at a friend's house when it happened. By dinner, I was the one apologizing. That pattern carved itself deeper every year. Haley's failures became my responsibilities. Her tears became my silence. I learned to clean up broken glass without making a sound, to step aside so she could shine, to make myself smaller so she could seem bigger. Mom would stroke Haley's hair and tell her everything would be okay. Dad would look at me and ask why I couldn't be more understanding of my sister's sensitive nature. So I became the steady one, the reliable daughter, the problem solver, the one who never needed comfort because I never seemed to break. And when Marcus came into my life 6 years ago, drawn to what he called my groundedness, I thought I'd finally found someone who valued the qualities my family had always taken for granted. "You make everything feel possible," he told me on our second date, watching me efficiently reorganize a picnic he'd forgotten half the supplies for. Like nothing can shake you. I built my marriage on that foundation. Morning coffee from the same corner shop before sunrise. Reports reviewed before Marcus woke up. Evenings spent reading while he watched games, each of us content in our separate rhythms. I thought we were solid. I thought steady meant strong. The cracks started so small I convinced myself I was imagining them. Haley showing up at our apartment more often, staying later. "Just needed to talk," she'd say, mascara smudged, another crisis with another boyfriend. Marcus would make her tea, let her curl up on our couch, tell me I should be more patient with her struggles. I'd find strands of her hair on our guest bathroom counter and remind myself she'd always been dramatic about personal space. Then came the nights Marcus worked late, the texts that came at odd hours that he'd dismiss as work stuff or helping your sister with something. The cologne I didn't recognize on his shirt, the way he started comparing me to Haley in small, cutting ways. "Your sister really knows how to make people feel appreciated." Haley would never stress about something this small. "Maybe if you were a little more expressive." At family dinners, I started noticing how they'd go quiet when I entered rooms mid-conversation, how Mom would watch Haley with this soft, knowing warmth, how Dad would ask Marcus if he was managing okay with all Riley's work stress. I'd sit there with my fork halfway to my mouth, realizing I was being rewritten in real time, transformed from the capable daughter into the difficult wife, and nobody had bothered to ask if the story was true. But I didn't understand the full picture until that dinner, until Haley's announcement, until I watched my husband accept congratulations for fathering my sister's child, while my parents beamed like this was exactly what they'd been hoping for. The dinner ended with hugs I wasn't part of, plans I wasn't included in. Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen while the others celebrated in the dining room. "I know this is complicated," she said, arranging leftover appetizers. She wouldn't look at me. "But Haley's going to need support. You're the most financially stable and what?" The words came out quieter than I meant them to. "And you've always been so good at handling things." She finally met my eyes. "It's not the baby's fault. We're all going to need to step up." That night, I went home to an apartment that felt like it belonged to someone else. Same eucalyptus candle on the counter, same stack of reports on my desk, same framed photos of a marriage that had apparently ended months ago without anyone telling me. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and let myself feel it. Not the betrayal itself, but the weight of understanding that my family hadn't been fooled or manipulated. They'd simply chosen the easier story, the one where Haley was fragile and deserving, and I was strong enough to carry everyone else's mistakes. I didn't cry. I've never been good at crying. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling backward through months of texts, calendar entries, credit card statements, not looking for proof of the affair, that was obvious now, but looking for the pattern, the architecture of how they'd built this narrative. And the architecture was everywhere. Messages from Marcus to Haley at 2 a.m., marked as checking in on you. Charges for dinner at restaurants, Marcus told me, were client meetings. Haley telling Mom she'd brought me soup on a night I was actually in Seattle for a conference. My parents praising Marcus for being so patient during my supposed rough patch at work, a rough patch that didn't exist outside their conversations. Around midnight, Mrs. Turner from next door knocked softly. She stood in her bathrobe holding a container of cookies she definitely hadn't just baked. "I saw your light on," she said, then quieter. "I saw Marcus coming and going from your sister's place a lot this spring. Before all this, I thought you knew. Even my 68-year-old neighbor had seen the truth before my own family admitted it." I thanked her, closed the door, and went back to my phone. By 3 a.m., I had a timeline. By dawn, I had screenshots organized by date. By the time the sun rose over Portland, I had something else, too. A plan. The envelope arrived 4 days after the confrontation at my parents' house. Plain white official seal, return address from the county courthouse. Inside was a petition for child support. Haley and Marcus were formally requesting that I contribute financially to their child's upbringing, citing my stable income and family responsibility. I read it 3 times. Each time, new details revealed themselves. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding payment. The petition claimed I'd been emotionally unstable and that supporting the child would give me purpose and connection to family. It portrayed them as struggling young parents and me as the cold, wealthy sister who needed to step up. I drove to my parents' house that evening with the petition in my bag. Some part of me, some stubborn, hopeful part, thought they'd be horrified, that seeing it in legal language would wake them up. Dad opened the door. Mom was already in the living room, Haley beside her on the couch. They'd been expecting me. "Before you say anything," Dad started, "we know how this looks." "Do you?" I held up the petition. Mom stood. "Riley, you have to understand. Haley needs help. She's always struggled financially, and now with the baby she had with my husband." "Former husband," Haley corrected softly. "The divorce was finalized last week." I actually laughed. One short, sharp sound that made everyone flinch. "You filed for divorce on my behalf?" Marcus stepped into the living room from the kitchen, because of course he was there. Of course this was an ambush. "We tried to talk to you about it, but you've been shutting everyone out. We had to move forward. Riley. Dad's voice had that firm, disappointed tone I'd heard my whole life. You're financially secure. You don't have children of your own. You can help. It's not the baby's fault, Mom added, and I realized she'd said that exact phrase before. They'd rehearsed this. Haley stood, one hand on her stomach. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, reasonable, the same voice she'd used to explain away every broken promise and borrowed item she'd never returned. We're building a family. You can either help or you can step aside. There it was, not a request, an ultimatum. Choose complicity or exile. I looked at my parents, at my sister, at the man I'd woken up next to for 6 years, and I felt something inside me go perfectly, completely still. Okay, I said. Mom's shoulders relaxed. Dad nodded approvingly. Haley smiled. I'll see you in court, I added, and walked out before anyone could respond. The divorce papers arrived by courier the next morning. Marcus had filed weeks ago, forging my signature on the initial separation agreement. I immediately contacted an attorney who confirmed the filing was fraudulent and began the process of contesting it. But I had bigger priorities. I could unravel their legal manipulations later. The next 3 weeks blurred into a routine I'd perfected in my career: gather data, identify patterns, build the case. But this time, the operations I was managing weren't shipping schedules and supply chains. They were years of manipulation distilled into documentation. I started with the text messages, not just Marcus and Haley's obvious affair, but the peripheral conversations. Haley telling Mom I'd broken down crying at work on days I'd been presenting to the executive team. Marcus telling Dad I'd been picking fights during weeks I'd been traveling for conferences. I matched every claim against my calendar, my emails, my credit card statements. Every lie had a timestamp, and every timestamp had a contradiction. Then I expanded outward. I contacted the restaurant where Marcus claimed we'd had a huge fight that ended with me storming out. The manager remembered us, remembered specifically that we'd had a pleasant dinner, and I'd left a generous tip. I got a statement. I found the colleague who'd supposedly witnessed me losing it in a meeting. She was confused. That meeting had been one of my calmest. I tracked down the moving company Marcus hired to clear out his stuff while I was supposedly too unstable to be present. The movers confirmed I'd actually been at work, and Marcus had insisted on scheduling it that way. I got their invoice, complete with date and time. Mrs. Turner gave me a written statement about Marcus's visits to Haley's apartment, including dates and approximate times. I matched those against Marcus's phone location data, which he'd never bothered to turn off on our shared family plan. Every late night at the gym placed him at Haley's address. But the real revelation came from somewhere I hadn't expected. My parents' housekeeper, Maria, who'd worked for them for 15 years, asked to speak with me privately. Over coffee at a diner far from my parents' neighborhood, she told me everything she'd overheard. They talked about it like a plan, Maria said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. Last Christmas, after you left, your mother told Haley that Marcus seemed wasted on someone so closed off. Your father said you'd be fine because you always are. They convinced themselves they were doing everyone a favor. 2 weeks after I promised to see them in court, Haley's attorney filed the child support petition and scheduled a hearing. The notice arrived by certified mail, giving me exactly 10 days to prepare my response. I spent every evening after work organizing my evidence, creating a presentation so airtight that even a judge hearing 50 cases a day couldn't miss the pattern. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old wood. I arrived alone, carrying a single folder and a thumb drive. Haley and Marcus were already seated at their table, his hand covering hers, both of them wearing matching expressions of sympathetic concern. Behind them, my parents sat in the first row, Mom's purse on her lap like a shield. When Haley saw me, she leaned over to whisper something to their attorney. They both glanced my way. The attorney's expression said she thought this would be easy. The judge entered. We rose, sat, and the hearing began. Haley's attorney went first, her voice smooth and practiced. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. The petitioners are young parents facing financial hardship. Ms. Riley is the only family member with significant income and no dependents. She's been a part of this family system, and we're simply requesting she contribute to the child's welfare as any responsible family member would. Marcus cleared his throat, playing his part. Riley's always been the responsible one. She knows what's right. He paused. She's just been going through a difficult time, and we understand that, but the baby needs stability. Then Haley stood. Her voice trembled perfectly. I'm not asking for much, just help. My sister understands family responsibility. She looked directly at me. Or at least she used to. Behind her, Mom nodded. Dad stared at his hands. The judge turned to me. Miss Riley, do you have a response? I stood slowly, folder in hand. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The moment they expected me to either crumble or rage. To be the unstable woman they'd spent months describing to everyone who'd listen. Instead, I smiled at Haley. Not a warm smile, not a bitter one. Just acknowledgement that we both knew what was about to happen. Your Honor, I do have a response. I opened my folder, and I'd like to start by addressing some factual inaccuracies in the petition. I placed the first document on the table. This is a text thread between Marcus and Haley spanning 6 months. You'll notice the timestamps place Marcus at Haley's apartment during hours he told me he was at work or the gym. The judge leaned forward slightly. Haley's face went pale. These, I continued, laying down the next set of papers, are screenshots of Haley telling our mother I had emotional breakdowns at work. Here are corresponding emails from my supervisor praising my performance during those exact time periods. Here's a statement from the colleague who supposedly witnessed one of these breakdowns. She confirmed no such incident occurred. Marcus shifted in his seat. That's taken out of context. The judge held up a hand. You'll have your turn. Continue, Ms. Riley. This is a statement from Mrs. Turner, my neighbor, documenting Marcus's regular visits to Haley's apartment beginning 8 months ago. These, I placed down Marcus's phone location records, confirm those visits. Every late-night workout and client dinner placed him at my sister's address. Mom made a small sound. Dad's face had gone red. And this, I said, placing down the final document, is a written statement from my parents' housekeeper, detailing a conversation she overheard last Christmas where my family discussed encouraging this relationship because they felt Marcus was wasted on someone closed off. The silence in the courtroom felt physical. I wasn't done. Your Honor, this isn't a case about family responsibility. It's a case about 3 people who conducted an affair, convinced themselves it was justified, and then tried to financially weaponize that affair against the person they betrayed. The petition claims I'm emotionally unstable. I have statements from my employer, my colleagues, my doctor, and multiple witnesses confirming otherwise. The petition claims I should support this child out of family obligation. I'd argue that the people who destroyed my family while systematically destroying my reputation have forfeited the right to claim family obligation. I pulled out the thumb drive. I have 6 months of documented conversations, medical records proving I sought therapy specifically to process this betrayal in healthy ways, and financial records showing that during this entire period, I maintained perfect performance at work while Marcus drained our joint account to furnish Haley's apartment. The judge took the thumb drive. The room held its breath. Then Haley broke. She's making it sound worse than it was. We fell in love. These things happen. In my bed? I asked quietly. In the home I paid for? Marcus stood. We didn't plan this. You were never there, Riley, always working, always busy. What were we supposed to do? Not commit fraud to force me to pay for your choices would be a start. The judge set down the thumb drive with a decisive click. I've heard enough. The petition for child support is denied. Furthermore, this court finds evidence of malicious misrepresentation and abuse of legal process. I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for review of potential fraud charges." Mom gasped. Dad stood up like he might object, then sat down again. Haley grabbed Marcus's arm, her face crumpling. We didn't. But they had, and everyone in that room finally knew it. The judge continued. "Ms. Riley, you're entitled to file a countersuit for damages. I'd strongly advise you consult with an attorney regarding defamation and emotional distress claims." I closed my folder. "Thank you, Your Honor." Behind me, I heard Mom start to cry, not the gentle, sympathetic tears she'd always given Haley. These were the harsh, choking sobs of someone confronting a truth they'd spent months running from. Dad was silent. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. The hallway outside felt quiet compared to the chaos I'd left behind. Through the heavy doors, I could hear raised voices. My parents demanding explanations, Haley sobbing, Marcus insisting this wasn't how it was supposed to go. But their voices were already fading, getting smaller, becoming part of a story I was no longer part of. I pushed through the courthouse doors into October sunlight. Portland smelled like rain and fallen leaves. For the first time in months, I could breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "We didn't know it was this bad. Please call us." I deleted it without responding. Some conversations don't deserve to happen. Some betrayals don't get rewritten with apologies. At the corner, I stopped at the same coffee shop where I'd bought my morning coffee every workday for 6 years. The barista knew my order, knew my name, had asked about my rough patch with genuine concern 2 months ago. Today, she smiled at me differently. "You look lighter," she said, handing me my usual. She was right. Not happier, not victorious, just lighter. Like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks I didn't realize I could set down. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking back to myself, to the version who existed before she learned to make herself smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. The version who understood that love, without truth, is just another word for convenience. 3 months later, Haley and Marcus's fraud case was settled quietly with probation and required repayment of legal fees. My attorney also finalized my legitimate divorce from Marcus, on my terms this time, with a settlement that recovered everything he'd stolen from our joint accounts. My parents sent a card. "We want to talk when you're ready." I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be, but I was ready for other things. I started therapy properly, not to process betrayal, but to understand why I'd accepted being rewritten for so long. I took the promotion I'd been putting off. I moved to a new apartment with bigger windows and no memories attached to the walls. And slowly, carefully, I started building a life that belonged entirely to me. If you've ever had to choose yourself after everyone else chose convenience, you're not alone. The story they wrote about you was never the truth. It was just easier for them to believe. Share this if you've had to rewrite your own narrative. And subscribe because there are more stories about finding your voice after losing everything that tried to silence it. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.